Hey guys, what's going on? It's me, Will, and I am back with another quick video. And I guess this video is for all the hardcore punk music fans out there, because today I'm going to be doing a book review. And the book that I'm going to be reviewing today is the newest autobiography by Mr. Keith Morris, with his newest book called My Damage, and the story of a punk rock survivor. And this one came out just last year in 2016 on Da Capo Press. And there he is, Mr. Keith Morris with a crazy face. And there's the book. I'll put a link here in the description if you want to pick it up in Amazon. But anyways, I think a lot of my subscribers will know of Keith Morris, or at least a little bit of Keith Morris. But this guy was a pretty important dude in the punk rock music world, because, of course, he was the founding member, or one of the founding members, and the first lead singer of the legendary hardcore punk band Black Flag. And of course, Black Flag being an extremely influential band for a lot of hardcore and punk bands that came out in the 80s and 90s. And yeah, a very important band as well. So not only was he in Black Flag, but after his short stint in Black Flag, he went out to also start the Circle Jerks, which was another very influential band for the hardcore punk music world. And I guess more recently he just started a new band called Off, where he's having almost like a comeback in his career, because he's enjoying a lot of success with that band Off. So needless to say, this guy was pretty important and still is a pretty important dude in the punk rock music community. And of course I was very curious to hear all his stories from when he was in Black Flag and in the Circle Jerks, and now his story up to today. And that's what he does in this book. He tells his story from his childhood all the way to nowadays. And when he tells his story of his childhood, he tells a lot of the stories about very personal stories. Some of them are pretty shocking as well, of him growing up in California, and his relationship with his parents and his dad, and also a story of drug abuse, not only of alcohol, but a lot of stories about drinking a lot. And this is a guy that had a lot of drug problems, but even when he was very, very young. So he tells his story from what he remembers from when he was growing up in California, and also he goes on to meet Greg Ginn to start on playing with Black Flag. And he also tells a lot of really cool stories on how he discovered punk rock music. How he started playing in Black Flag, and how he ended up being the singer and the frontman of Black Flag, which he kind of got promoted to that role based on his charisma and the way that he would perform and the energy that he would put on stage, which was a pretty interesting story to learn about from his early ages or early stages of Black Flag and how the band was created. And also a history of an insider history of violence back then in the 70s in Los Angeles. It was a very tough time to live in. Lots of gangs, lots of violence in the punk rock music community. So he tells a lot of stories about that from when he was growing up in LA in the 70s. And then later on, he also tells his story from what he remembers, or from his perspective, on how he left Black Flag, basically because he didn't agree with all the structure that the band had, on to to start his new band called the Circle Jerks, which, in my opinion, some of his best work was in the Circle Jerks. I think Group Sex is probably one of the most important albums in the punk rock music world. A very, very good album. And in my opinion, what he did in the Circle Jerks is better than what he did in Black Flag, which he only released one single, one EP in Black Flag, which is the famous Nervous Breakdown EP from Black Flag. I have this is a repress of the EP. Which is very, very good, a very important EP in the hardcore punk music world. But in my opinion, what he did in the Circle Jerks, as far as music wise, it's better than what he did in Black Flag. But anyways, he goes on to tell his story in the Circle Jerks, and most of his career is spent in the Circle Jerks. And then I guess he almost became like the manager of the band, and he went on to pursue a record deal from a major record label back when it was okay for bands or punk bands to be in major labels. So he tells the story also from his perspective on how he ended up landing the deal, and how he ended up becoming basically the manager of the band and going on to pursue the success that he had in the Circle Jerks. So it's very insightful in a way if you're a big fan of the Circle Jerks and Black Flag, because he tells basically his the story from his perspective and how he came up with the with this EP in Black Flag, as well as all the albums in the Circle Jerks. And actually, I just want to play you a short clip from the Circle Jerks, which, like I said before, the album Group Sex, in my opinion, is one of the best and one of the most important albums in hardcore punk music. I'm gonna play you a short clip from one of the songs from Group Sex. Let's check it out. So yeah, that was a short clip from the Circle Jerks from their album Group Sex, which came out back in 1980. And in case you're wondering about that song, it's pretty raw sounding, but if you consider that there were very few bands that were playing that kind of music back then in the late 70s, early 80s, so they were pretty, I guess, revolutionary in the world of music in general, or hardcore music in general. Yeah, I always thought that album is just fantastic. I think the album is just like 20 minutes long, but it is an amazing album, and yeah, one of the great albums in the hardcore punk music world. And like I said before, perhaps better than what he did in Black Flag, but that's my opinion. I think a lot of people might disagree with that. But anyways, he goes on in his book to tell his story. Of course, lots of crazy stories when he was growing up back in the day in the 70s and the 80s. He was living the rock and roll music lifestyle, just drinking and doing drugs and playing music all the time. He was just living it to the extreme, I guess, and he was abusing the drugs pretty hard back then. And I guess right in the middle of his career, or I guess in the middle of the book, is when he kind of has a revelation where he starts having a lot of health issues when he's a little bit older, and he kind of realizes that he can't keep doing that for the rest of his life. So he kind of turns his life around. He tells a story, and he tells a very deep and emotional story of a conversation that he had with his dad. It's kind of hard to read in some points, but it is a very interesting story as well. And in the middle of the book to the end of the book, it's a completely different story. This is when he was completely sober, and he turns his life around, and he starts focusing on his career, and that's when he becomes more of a manager and a producer rather than an artist and a musician. He was still playing the Circle Jerks, but he was kind of taking it almost like a side project, which it was pretty interesting, because he went on to discover a lot of really important bands that I didn't know of, but apparently he was a pretty important manager and a producer, and I guess also later on in his career he was a record label guy, so he was a pretty important guy in the music world as well. But anyways, as far as my review, I do have to recommend this to anybody that is a hardcore punk music fan out there. I think you will end up learning a lot from his life, a lot of stories from Black Flag, a lot of insights from the perspective of a band member and the founding band member of Black Flag, as well as Circle Jerks. And also, if you're a fan of Off, which is a great band as well, he tells a lot of stories of how that band got started. And he also tells, like I said before, a lot of really crazy stories when he was high or on drugs all the time. as well as more recent stories when he was just sober and he had a lot of health issues, and he started traveling across the world, and yeah, he just has a lot of really cool stories. I think if you are a punk rock music fan, you will enjoy it a little bit more. But even if you are not, if you're just a music fan and you don't like hardcore punk music, you will still enjoy the stories. And I would say if you are interested in the music industry, you will like this book, because this is a guy that played a pretty vital role when there was a music industry, when there were record labels looking for bands. So he tells a lot of stories about back in the day when he was working in the music industry. And if you're interested in working in the music industry, or if you're a musician, I think you will enjoy this book as well. Now, as far as a review, I would say that there are a little bit of inconsistencies in the book when you read it, especially when he talks about his relationship with Black Flag and Greg Ginn in the early stages when he just joined Black Flag. And then when he ended up moving on to start his own band, the Circle Jerks, one of the things that he says early in the book is that he didn't like the structure that Black Flag had. He didn't like being told what to do and when to go to rehearse for the band and when to do the shows. And he didn't like that kind of structure. He was more relaxed. He wanted to take it, play it by the ear and just do whatever he wanted to. So that's one of the reasons why he decided to leave Black Flag. But when he starts his own band called the Circle Jerks, he kind of tells more of or he kind of takes on more of a manager position, where he kind of calls the shots, and he starts taking care of the bookings of the shows, and he kind of goes on to pursue the record label deal, and he becomes more of a manager as well. So it's kind of inconsistent, because I don't know if he really wanted to have that structure in Black Flag, or he didn't want to have that structure in Black Flag, but later on in Circle Jerks he did want to have that structure. He wanted to take it more seriously, I guess. So it was kind of inconsistent in that way. And another thing that is important to note, like I said before, this guy was either high or on drugs. I would say 90% of the time that he was awake, back when he was drinking and doing drugs. So I don't really know how much you can trust a lot of the stories that he told in the book. In fact, in the very beginning of the book, he has a disclaimer where he says, hey, this is the stories as I remember them. Of course, I was high or on drugs or drunk all the time back then, but these are the stories how I remember it. So I don't know how much you can really trust all the stories from Keith Morrison, especially in the early part of the book, from his stories from Black Flag and the Circle Jerks. But that just a little bit of commentary. I still do think that the book is very good. Just a little bit of a comment about that. And overall, it's a story from someone that played a vital role, a very important role in the hardcore punk music world, and not only the punk rock music world, but in the music industry in general. And overall, a very charismatic guy. A lot of humor in this book. So I highly recommend that you pick it up. I would give it 4.5 stars out of 5. Very entertaining read. It's a quick read as well, so you can read it in just a couple of weeks. Great book by the one and only Keith Morris, with My Damage. Again, like I said, I'll put a link here in the description so you can check it out if you want to pick it up from Amazon. And if you have read it, let me know what you think, because I'm curious to see all the what people think about this book as well. But anyways, that's those are my comments on the book review. Let me know what you think again, and take care, VC. Bye bye.